And a really big warm welcome to this presentation from the Urban Penguin, where we take a look at streaming desktops in Docker. Now, when using Docker, we're traditionally using applications built into the container, but sometimes we're going to want a graphical desktop as well. So we'll look at how we can achieve this. Hello and welcome to the command line of my Docker system. This is running as a command line only environment. And when we take a look at it, I've got about 4 gig of RAM for my host system, so not necessarily that well resourced. The purpose of showing you this is showing you that we can run a full graphical environment inside of Docker. When I take a look at Docker images, I've already downloaded an image, and you'll see why when you look at the size, 7.5 gigabytes, and you really don't want to watch that coming down, do you? But it's being created by the people at the Chasm web team, and they make their own version of VNC and have developed these streaming images. And we're going to be taking a look at using Rocky Linux 9 desktop inside of Docker. We're going to begin by going through and running our Docker container. You can see I'm running Docker run, --rm to remove the container when it shuts down. The -dit is running detached and giving me an interactive terminal. We've increased the shared memory size from the default Docker size of 64 meg. We're mapping our normal VNC ports, and we're setting an environment variable for the VNC password. And then, of course, we're using that Chasm Web Rocky Linux 9 desktop image. So it's a pretty standard Docker command that we can fire up, and then we can move out through to our browser so we can see this working. I just need to point my browser through to port 6901, and the VNC that's been developed by the Chasm team don't need any special plugins. So I'm just running through to advanced. The certificate is not trusted, as you would expect within a container like this. And we can then go through and see that we've loaded the Rocky Linux desktop. This is running Rocky Linux 9.2. We can go through and take a look at our command line, and we can see, if I look at the memory on this, we've just inherited the memory from the host system, so the same 3.9 gig. And when we go through and take a look at the OS release file, we're going to be able to see this is Rocky Linux 9.2 that we're running. So this is starting to look very good. And if your users only needed straightforward access to the system without elevated privileges, this would be really good. But when I go through and take a look at sudo -i to elevate my privileges, we're being prompted for the Chasm user password, and this hasn't been published. Now, it's not the same as your VNC password, so there's no point just putting in the password that I use to log on to this system. However, we can, of course, adjust our image. So let's go through and disconnect from this, and we can then go through and just delete our running container. So let's just do a docker rm -f for force because it is running, and I can just go through and put the first few characters of the SHA. So with that done, I can go through and take a look at my Docker file. Now, I don't need much in this. It is really just making use of the original image, but then copying a file across to the sudoers.d plugin directory. When we take a look at the file I'm copying across, of course, this Chasm file is allowing passwordless access to the Chasm user. So it is really simple to gain full administrative rights to your desktop machine. And now when I go through and use Docker build X using the build module, and we can specify the name or tag of the image, I'm just going to call it Rocky. And then I can go through and say this directory. Again, it took really quick to run because, of course, we already have the main image done. But now if I go back and instead of executing from the Chasm VNC image, I'll go through and use the rocky image that I've just created and return back to my browser and go through and refresh. We can see then that I gain access back to the desktop, but now when we go through and check its operation, when I go through and let's say we'll just install some software, so do a sudo yum install -y. I'm just going to choose Ruby. I'm choosing anything that's not likely to be installed. And you can see now that I'm not being prompted for the password and it's going ahead updating the metadata. So if you need a graphical desktop for users to be able to make use of, but you want a lightweight version, then considering these Chasm VNC containers could be one way of doing it.
All that is left to say is thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this, then you are probably sadder than I first thought. For more of this drivel, please subscribe, like and comment to @TheUrbanPenguin.